The Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. So the question is, when is the Sabbath day? So ask yourself, why is it the only commandment that is being attacked? Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me. What are we speaking about? So we are speaking about the issue of the Sabbath, right? I feel like it's a topic that before we neglected, but I see right now it is gathering traction and a lot of people are speaking on this particular topic. So I thought I should also give my 2 cents regarding the Sabbath. I mean, given that I am a Sabbath keeper myself, I thought let's speak on this issue because it is a vital topic, especially in these last days, right? So I did put up a presentation, or rather a PowerPoint, so that I do not lose track of what I want to speak about. So okay, let's start from the beginning. So first things first, a couple of questions that we need to ask ourselves, and then we will answer those questions, right? Number 1, what is the Sabbath and when was it instituted? All right, so what's the Sabbath and when was it instituted? Those are the first 2 questions. So let's start in Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 to 3. So it says, so from verse 1, it says, so the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was completed. On the 7th day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all his work, and God blessed the 7th day and declared it holy, because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creation, right? So that's from Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 up until 3. So what exactly is the Sabbath, as our first question alludes, right? So as we have read, the Sabbath is the day that God himself chose and made holy. That's the first thing, right? The second thing, it is the only day in the week that he had set apart. So all the other days were just normal days except the Sabbath, right? Why did he set this apart, right? Because after finishing his work of creation, God rested. And he rested not because he was tired, right? But he rested from his work because he had completed the work of creation, right? That is the most important thing. So therefore, what is the Sabbath? So the Sabbath is a commemoration of creation, and it is a weekly reminder of who our Creator is, right? So what is the Sabbath? It is commemoration of creation, and it is a weekly reminder of who our Creator is. Okay. So second question, when was the Sabbath instituted? Right. So many believe that it started in Mount Sinai when Moses was given the tablets of stone where the commandments were written, and people believe that the Sabbath itself was only for the Jewish people or the Hebrew people, right? Which is not correct, as we have seen right now that it was instituted in Genesis. In Genesis, there was no Jew, there was no Hebrew, it was only Adam and Eve that was alive at the time, right? So yeah, like I said, many believe that it was only instituted in Sinai when it was given as a commandment, right? But there is a text that I would like us to embark on regarding the Sabbath, right? So let's read Exodus 16, verse 22 to 30. So it says, okay, just to give you context of what is happening in this particular chapter. So the Israelites were left Egypt, and then after they had left Egypt, they were on their way to the promised land, right? So they haven't reached Sinai at this point whatsoever. So they were hungry and they were busy murmuring to Moses, right? So obviously Moses entreated the Lord, and then the Lord decided to rain manna for the people. And then there was specific instructions regarding the manna. So every day there was a fresh amount of manna that was rained down for the people. So people were not allowed to take more that would be left over for the next day, right? Because the following day it would be rotting, it would have worms and all of those things, right? So so God had instructed them that each day you will get a fresh amount of manna that is rained down, right? And then there was a special instruction regarding the Sabbath, right? So it says here, on the sixth day, they gathered twice as much as usual. This is Exodus chapter 16, verse 22, from verse 22. It says, on the sixth day, they gathered twice as much as usual, 4 quarts for each person instead of 2. Then all the leaders of the community came and asked Moses for an explanation. And then he told them that that is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow will be a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath day, set apart for the Lord. So bake or boil as much as you want today and set aside what is left for tomorrow. So so the manna that was rained on the day before the Sabbath, right, was supposed to be a double portion. People were supposed to take double of that, and then on Sabbath they were not supposed to go out to the fields to gather any manna at all, because they wouldn't find any, right? Then we go to verse 24, and it says, so they put some aside until morning, just as Moses had commanded. And in the morning, the leftover food was wholesome and good, without maggots or odor. Moses said, eat this for today. For today is a Sabbath day dedicated to the Lord. There will be no food on the ground today. You may gather the food for 6 days, but the 7th day is the Sabbath. There will be no food on the ground that day. And then verse 27 says, some of the people went out anyway on the Sabbath day, but they found no food. Rebellious. The Lord asked Moses, how long will these people refuse to obey my commandments? They must realize that the Sabbath is the Lord's gift to you. Okay, that is why he gives you 2-day supply on the 6th day, so there will be enough for 2 days. On the Sabbath day, you must each stay in your place. Do not go out to pick up food on the 7th day, so the people do not gather any food on the 7th day. So yeah, so very simple instruction that they will get a double portion on the day before the Sabbath, and then on the Sabbath there won't be any manna that is rained down, so they would basically have manna received the day before for the Sabbath as well, right? And it's very interesting because God says why, and then you see the people are rebellious, and then it's interesting because God says, why do these people not follow my commandments? Remember, this is before they reach the Mount Sinai, before they receive the commandments of God at Mount Sinai. So thus indicating that Mount Sinai is not the pinpoint of the command of the Sabbath commandment specifically, right? So, but let's look at Mount Sinai's 10 commandments, particularly the Sabbath commandment, right? So if we look at Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 to 11, it says from verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall thou labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maid servant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the 7th day, and he hallowed it. It's quite a long one, but it's very, very important, right? So let's pause and notice something powerful in the Sabbath commandment. It first begins by saying, remember, all right? So why is this important, right? It is important first because it reminds us that the Sabbath was instituted in creation week, in Genesis, right? In the beginning, right? It is not something new that they get at Sinai, like we have read the previous verse where God also instructed them to keep the Sabbath before they received these commandments, right? And then the second thing it tells us is that we should not forget to keep the Sabbath ongoing, all right? Hence, it starts with remember. We shouldn't forget it at all in the future as well, right? So let's also look at verse 11 of Exodus 20. So it says, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the seventh day and made it holy." All right. So we can see here that it takes us back to where? To creation, right? Like I said earlier, that the Sabbath is a commemoration of what? Of creation. And also it is a daily or rather a weekly reminder that we have a creator, right? So it also points us to God as our creator. So powerful, right? So I hope we're on the same page, right? So we're going to skip to question number 3. So it says that, when is the Sabbath day? That is a very, very, very interesting question I would pose. And I'll tell you why in a minute, right? So let's just read though from Mark chapter 15, verse 42 to 43, right? So context, this is the crucifixion of Jesus, right? Skipping right through to the New Testament. So in Mark, it says from verse 42 to 43, it says, "This all happened on Friday, the day of preparation, the day before the Sabbath. As evening approached, Joseph of Arimathea took a risk and went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus," right? So the question is, when is the Sabbath day, right? Then there's another text in Mark chapter 16, verse 1. It says, "Saturday evening, when the Sabbath had ended, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Simone went out and purchased burial spices so they can anoint Jesus's body." So the question is, when is the Sabbath day, right? So like I said earlier on, it is an interesting question because I don't know if it is common knowledge for everybody, but for me, before I found out about the Sabbath, it wasn't common knowledge, right? So all my life I thought in my mind that Sunday was the Sabbath, because Sunday is the day where we go to church, Sunday is a rest day and all of that. So that was me, that was my life, right? Until I met somebody and then we had a debate regarding the Sabbath. It was a very interesting conversation, but yeah. So I know a lot of people like me back then believe, or they haven't come to the knowledge of this, right? Or maybe they've heard it, but they've never really, they shrugged it off, right? And remember earlier on, I said a lot of people say the Jewish Sabbath is Saturday and then the Christian Sabbath is on Sunday, right? We will tackle that in a bit, but it was very important how the person who was busy breaking it down for me broke it down. And basically how he broke it down to me, he gave me this particular verses, and he also pointed out to Easter, you know, how Christians celebrate Easter as they commemorating the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? And particularly the resurrection of Jesus Christ, people celebrate it because we have a new faith, a new hope in the fact that Jesus rose from the dead, and we also will rise again, you know. Death is not the end of it all. So it is a very pivotal moment in Christianity. And yeah, so when the person alluded to the fact that, look at the Easter story and how it is playing out, and you then calculate or decide for yourself from what you have read, and regarding what God says about the Sabbath, you know. So when I read this, and I was very stunned as to how come I never realized, or I never paid attention. And then I started asking questions as to, okay, then if Saturday is the Sabbath and not Sunday, why are we keeping Sunday as holy instead of Saturday? Because if you look at how the world is set up, Saturday is just another day that people just, it's sort of like a free day, those who do not work on Saturdays, where they can go shopping, clean their houses, this and that, right? And then Sunday is the actual day where people actually gather to go to church and worship God and so forth and so on. So it feels like the Sunday has replaced the Sabbath, right? Which is very confusing, right? How did this come about? What happened, right? What happened to the Sabbath, right? Which is questions that I had, and I know a lot of people will have after looking at this video, right? So yeah, so just a spoiler alert, and I'm sorry to burst people's bubbles, but Sunday is not the Sabbath, guys. It's not even the Christian Sabbath. And we'll see evidences why as I continue, but I'm sorry, guys, it's not. Sabbath, if God says Saturday is the Sabbath and he calls that day holy, why are we taking it upon ourselves to take another day and call that day holy? We are not holy. We are sinful people, okay? We have been born into sin, right? So we cannot make a day holy. We cannot make a day sanctified, and we cannot do that. Only somebody that is holy is able to do that, which is God himself. And hence he said, Saturday is my day. It's my day. It's the Lord's day, right? And the funny thing about saying that it's the Lord's day, a lot of people, when they say the Lord's day, they think it's Sunday. But remember, when Jesus Christ rose again, he never, you can read from Genesis all up until Revelation, he never said to his disciples, okay guys, now that I have risen up from the dead, you guys can forget about Sabbath, you guys can continue and start commemorating me and call my day Sunday or the first day of the week. No, he never said such a thing, right? So let's go back to the lesson because I'm digressing. So the fourth bullet point that I want to speak about is that what is supposed to be done on Sabbath, right? So let's check what Jesus did while he was alive on this earth on Sabbath, right? So we're going to look at Luke chapter 4 verse 16, which says, when he came to the village of Nazareth, his boyhood home, he went as usual. Some version says as per his custom, right? To the synagogue on the Sabbath and stood up to read the scriptures, right? And then verse 31 says, then Jesus went to Capernaum, a town in Galilee, and taught there in the synagogue every Sabbath, right? Then Luke chapter 6 verse 6 to 9 says, on another Sabbath day, a man with a deformed right hand was in the synagogue while Jesus was teaching. The teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees watched Jesus closely. If he healed the man's hand, they planned to accuse him of working on the Sabbath. I mean, even when I read this, I'm just like, how ridiculous. So, but anyways, verse 8, but Jesus knew their thoughts. He said to the man with the deformed hand, come and stand in front of everyone. So the man came forward. Then Jesus said to his critics, I have a question for you. Does the law permit good deeds on a Sabbath? That's a very good question. Or is it a day for doing evil? Is this day to save a life or to destroy it? Very, very good question, right? Obviously, those people couldn't answer him because the Sabbath day is a day where, like I said, we commemorate creation. We remember God as creator God, and everything good needs to be happening on the Sabbath. So including healing of people, including the preaching of God's word, which is what Jesus was doing, right? So what did Jesus actually do on the Sabbath? He went to the synagogue to teach and read the word of God. He healed people, right? So now some of us, I know, might say to me that, listen, B, didn't the Pharisees accuse Jesus of breaking the Sabbath, right? And which is a great question, but what I will ask you is that if we can agree that Jesus is the Lord, he is the begotten Son of God, he is God, right? If we can agree on that, then who instituted the Sabbath? It is God himself, right? So if God is telling you that this is how you need to keep the Sabbath, who are you to question him on how to do it? Because remember, these Pharisees had put in their human-made traditions to make God's law very difficult to follow. So that's why even the Sabbath was very burdensome to some people, because they put so many restrictions in the Sabbath itself that people didn't find delight in keeping the Sabbath, right? And you could see also with the things that they were accusing Jesus of, it's really ridiculous because yes, Jesus is supposed to heal people on the Sabbath. Like, what do you mean? You know, if you're hungry, are you supposed to starve yourself and not eat because it's the Sabbath? That's just ridiculous, right? But anyways, I digress. So let's look at verses like Mark chapter 2 verse 27. It says, and he said unto them, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. Therefore, the Son of Man is the Lord also of the Sabbath. That is such a powerful point because it shows, like we said earlier on, that the Sabbath is a gift from God to us, right? it is a day we need to rest from our day-to-day labor. That is amazing. Secondly, it is a day where we commemorate the Lord and what he has done from creation, even in redeeming us through the cross and his death on the cross, right? It is to remember what God, hence the commandment itself starts with remember, because you're supposed to reflect on the goodness of the Lord. All right, you're supposed to remember that, wow, God has taken me through this phase in my life and he has put me. Do you understand the significance of how important the Sabbath is? So, all right. So now I'm going to get into the last 3 points that I want to speak about, because I feel like, yeah, I'm going on and on. And already this conversation is long, right? So, I hope we've cleared all of that up, and I hope you guys get where I'm coming from regarding the Sabbath, right? And I know a lot of us are scared because we are so used to keeping Sunday, right? We have been taught since childhood that Sunday is the day of the Lord. This is the day we go to church and all of that. But don't you ask yourself why and where does it come from? And why particularly the Sabbath commandment is being trampled upon, right? I mean, okay, let me stop digressing. Let me get back to the lesson. So, okay. So, like I said, there are 3 points that I want to cover up as we conclude, right? The first one, or rather 2 of them, involve a particular apostle that is, I don't know, I feel like the Christian society or community has made this man a very controversial person in the Bible, and he's not. I feel like he's misunderstood and misquoted, right? And yeah, his books and everything that he wrote is taken way out of context, right? So this particular apostle, you know him very well, he's very popular, is Paul, also known as Saul, right? So Paul has writings about the Sabbath, believe you me. So, okay. Let's see. Yeah, he has written about the Sabbath quite expediently, and but I feel like I said, he's been misquoted, interpreted, and all of that. And it's because people take him out of context. Like, people read one verse or whatever and they just run with it. What I've learned is that when you're reading the Bible, you need to read the context of what they are speaking about, because if you just take one verse and run with it, you are going to be very lost and you're going to create your own interpretations. Many of the interpretations of the Bible itself is in the Bible. You don't even have to. It's not rocket science. No, it's in the Bible itself, right? And because we are lazy to read, and most of us listen to our preachers and all of that and take what they say and run with it, and that forms part of what we believe, that is very wrong. It is very important that we seek God for ourselves. He is a personal God, and that we ensure that we read the Bible for ourselves, because that's what he wants for our lives. Okay, right? Just to digress just a little bit, why did Jesus come to die for us? It is because we had fallen into sin, right? Great. What is the definition of sin according to the Bible, not according to the Bible, right? So let's go to 1 John chapter 3 verse 4, right? It says that sin is the transgression of the law, right? I'm paraphrasing. I didn't read the whole thing, but yeah, sin is the transgression of the law. So if sin is the transgression of the law, and then we are saying that Paul says that we shouldn't, or the law has been done away with, then it means that if the law has been done away with, then Jesus died for nothing. That's what we're saying, which is very, very, it's crazy. It's that's a crazy statement to say, right? However, like I said, Paul is misinterpreted. Paul is, misunderstood. What we need to understand when it comes to the laws that were given at Mount Sinai is that there was the moral law, right, which is the 10 Commandments, right, which today we still live by, right, and it still binds. It still binds, and I'll get to that just now. Then there is another law which is called the ceremonial law, right? The ceremonial law basically governed the festivals that were supposed to be held, the new moons that were supposed to be held, the feasting, the drinking and the eating, how it's supposed to be done in those different festivals, and as well as it governed the slaughtering of animals for the remission of sins. Did you catch that? Right? Those are the ceremonial laws. Okay. So which law? So now let's go back. If Paul is saying that the law has been done away with, which law has been done away with? Because now we're looking at two laws. We're looking at the law that was written by the finger of God on 2 tables of stones, which is the 10 Commandments, which tells you that you should not have any other God before God. You shouldn't blaspheme his name. You shouldn't make any idols. You should remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You should honor your father and your mother. You should not kill. You should not steal. You should not bear false witness. You should not. Do you understand? I'm missing 2 of them. Okay, you should not covet your neighbor's goods. Your neighbor's. You shouldn't do all of these things. Oh, you should not commit adultery. I forgot that in between there, right? You should not commit adultery, and you should not also covet, right? So all of those 10 commandments, right, given at Mount Sinai, you cannot tell me today that it has been done away with. No, because you cannot go around in this day and age killing people and saying, oh, the law has been done away with, so I'm fine. Or you cannot go around stealing people's stuff and say, oh, the law has been done away with, so I'm fine. I don't have to keep it. Or you cannot go around saying, okay, whatever, you know. Why? Because it still binds. It still binds, right? And the law that is no longer binding, the law that has been done away with, is the ceremonial law. Because today I do not have to look for an animal or a lamb or whatever to offer there at church for the priest to slaughter for my remission of sins. No, praise God, I don't have to do that, because Jesus came and he fulfilled those laws, those requirements that are needed by those ceremonial laws. Jesus fulfilled each and every one of them, all right? So you don't have to keep a feast of whatever, you know, and then do this and do that. No, you don't have to do all of those things, all right? Praise God for that. And that is what Paul is alluding to, right? He's not saying that the moral law has been done away with. So he's not telling you to go kill people and just be like, today, like I said, I don't have to slaughter a lamb, because why? Jesus died for me. I don't have to do all of that. But I do have to honor my father and my mother. I do have to reverence God and God alone and have no other gods before him. I do have to remember the Sabbath day, which is a very, very interesting thing, because all 9 commandments we can agree on as a community of Christians. But this one commandment of remember the Sabbath day, we argue about it. We argue about it. And then we throw in Paul and say, no, I don't have to keep the law. But then if I tell you about thou shalt not kill, you will not argue with me. It is in the same tables of stones. The 2 tables of stones, the one having to do with reverence to God himself, and one having to do with humanity. When Christ said, when they asked him which laws are the most important, what did he say? He said, love your God with all your heart, all your mind, and your soul and your spirit, and love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang the whole law, right, and the prophets. What is Jesus saying? There were 2 tables of stone. Love and reverence to God the Father. Love and respect to your neighbor. These 2 laws hangs the whole 10 commandments, okay? Because the first 4 commandments are speaking to God, because it starts with what? Thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Thou shalt not take my name in vain. Thou shalt not have any idols. Remember the Sabbath day. This commandment has to do with God, because it is God that instituted this commandment. And where did he institute it? In creation. So ask yourself, why is it the only commandment that is being attacked? It is because the devil understood that if he attacks this commandment, people will not understand who their creator God is and who their redeemer is. Okay? I've digressed way too long. So there's certain scriptures that people like to quote, misquote, I'll say, about Paul, right? Let's go to... okay, so the two scriptures that people like misquoting is Romans 14, speaking about nobody should judge you on meat or drink or a particular, reverencing a particular day and whatnot. And then another one is Colossians 2. Colossians 2 says from verse 16, right? This is a very popular one. It says, let no man therefore judge you in meat or drink or in respect of a holy day or a new moon or even the Sabbath days. This one gets people confused, I'd say. And then verse 17, it says, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ. Now, I want us to use our brains, okay? Based on what we have been speaking about regarding ceremonial laws, what was the need? What was the need for those ceremonies? It pointed to Jesus being the lamb that was going to be crucified, right? So the Hebrew people were given these commandments because they had to point back. They were looking forward to a redeemer that is coming to die for them, right? That's why they were. Remember, those lambs didn't fully wash away, but it was the faith that they had pointing towards. Hence, he says it is a shadow, right? What is a shadow? There's a real thing. If you are standing there, and then the sun reflects on you, and then you can see your shadow, right? Which one is the real thing? Is it you or the shadow? It's you, right? So the shadow was pointing to who? To Jesus, right? So the crucified lambs, the festivals and all of that, they were pointing to who? To Jesus, coming and fulfilling each and every one of those laws, right? Great. So when Paul says here in Colossians, let no man therefore judge you in what you may eat or drink or in respect of a holy day or a new moon or Sabbath days, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ. It's pointing to the ceremonies. It's not talking about the moral law where it says, remember the Sabbath day. Remember these festivals, they were also called Sabbaths. They were called new moons, they were called Sabbaths and all of those things, right? But it's not talking about the Sabbath day that was instituted in Eden. Remember when God instituted the Sabbath day in Eden, there was no sin. That's something that you need to remember. There was no sin when God instituted the Sabbath. So it cannot be a shadow if it is instituted when there's no sin. Okay? I want you, people just read verse 16 and 17 and just run a bit. But if you read a preceding verse from Colossians, which is verse 14 and 15, it says, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances this is Colossians, that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to the cross. And having spoiled principalities and powers, he made a shoe of them, openly triumphing over them in it. It says, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances. What is an ordinance? What is an ordinance? If you would Google or look up the meaning of an ordinance means ceremonies. It means rituals, right? So if he's saying blotting out the handwriting of ordinances, blotting out the ceremonies, right? And which were contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to the cross. What did Jesus nail to the cross? Those ordinances, those ceremonies. Therefore, we do not have to keep them. Therefore, I don't have to look for animals and whatnot for the remission of my sins. I pray to Jesus, I repent to Jesus, and I ask him for his blood to wash me. Okay? That is the law that Paul says it's done away with. Right? So, guys, that's what I wanted to say. pray about this topic. It's a very hard topic. In the next video, I will be posting about why was Sunday instituted, where does it come from, and why does the whole Christian nation follow it? Because it points to where we are in the stream of time and why are things happening. You will hear a lot about the Sabbath day and all of that, but which Sabbath? Which Sabbath? Remember the one thing that drove out Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden was God had instructed them that they can eat all of the fruit, but the one fruit, the one fruit which is on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they shouldn't eat. And that is the one thing that drove them out of Eden. It is such a simple thing. When we look back and we look at, it's such a simple thing. But also, look how the devil is strategic. Look how the devil is strategic. Putting a false Sabbath next to the real one. And calling the false one the real one. Very, very, very important. So the last verse that I will like to leave you guys with is Hebrews chapter 4, verse 4 and verse 4 to 6. It says, "For he spake in a certain place of the seventh day." This is Paul. "A certain place of the seventh day on this wise, and God did rest the seventh day from all his work. And in this place again, if they shall enter into my rest, seeing therefore it remaineth that some must enter therein, and they to whom it was first preached entered not because of unbelief." Again, he limited a certain day, saying in David, "Today, after so long time, as it is said, today, if ye will hear his voice, harden not your hearts."